everyone. Welcome back to She Blurbs Podcast. Today's guest is Nicole Fanning. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how are you? Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming on. So, Nicole is an author and a copywriter. So, can you tell our listeners when you first realized you wanted to be an author?
So I would say that I started pretty young. I grew up on a street that didn't really have a whole lot of kids my age. So I kind of had to make my own fun. So one of the things I did was I would write my own episodes of like TV shows that I liked, and I would give them to my mom so that my mom would mail them to the producers of the show. And she didn't. But in my little kid brain, I was like, I'm really influencing, the way the show goes. And none of my episodes ever air, just so you know. But I just as like a kid, I just always had this really big imagination and was obsessed. I devoured every book I could get my hands on. And I thankfully, when I was younger, I had a young friend who was kind of the same as me. So we would actually go home on the weekends, write some stuff, and then we would come back to school on Monday and we would trade chapters of our books. And so it kind of started really young, and it's kind of always stayed that way. But with the pandemic happening and us, being forced to stay at home and kind of find things to do, I was like, well, I could always do that, kind of have this idea in my head. Let's just see where it goes. And it kind of just took on a life of its own. So
Wow. Wait, so you started the first book last year, like during the pandemic?
yeah. So book one, I started I want to say in October of last year and published in April of this year. And then book two, I don't even know how I did it, but I cranked it out mainly because book one kind of ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So I knew that fans were going to be like, where's book two?
Yeah.
We're ready. So it took me like 8 months to kind of write the first one fully, but the second one took 4 months. So we got 1 and 2 out. But yeah, and then the last one in this trilogy comes out spring of next year.
Nice. Wow, that's amazing. So what does your family think about your writing?
I'd say they're pretty, like, for the most part, very supportive. I do have a couple select family members that really aren't into mafia romance. I think that they think it's a little bit darker than it actually is. At least mine anyway, because it comes with that, crime romance. Like, how could we be romanticizing crime? But for the most part, everybody's been really supportive. And, my main character in my book, she, without giving too much away, she kind of takes on this stepmother role to our male main character. He's a single dad and has a 6-year-old daughter because he's a widower. And she kind of takes on this stepmother role with this daughter. And so my stepmom had like a big influence on, the way that I wrote that story and wrote, that you can love someone that, isn't your blood child like it is your blood child. So she's been super supportive, and yeah, it's been great for the most part. Everybody's pretty supportive.
Wow, that's amazing. So what inspired you to write your Heart of the Inferno series?
So I'm always been a sucker for the villain. Like, I just always kind of like those morally gray characters. And so in my head, I saw this guy that he's obviously not a great guy. He's like a mafia don, high society billionaire. But he's not he's not unnecessary carnage kind of person. So he's not there to save the world. He's there to protect his world. And, obviously our main character, when she becomes his love interest, protect her. But I just really liked the story of how he would have come to be. So that's kind of the background, but the story itself was just kind of just something I had playing around in my head. And I don't know, I'm a big fan of Peaky Blinders. It's like the UK British show. Yeah. And I watched 365 Days, and I was like, I really like this, except for the whole kidnapping Stockholm thing. I'm like, so I wonder if what if we just changed that? What if we had it where he doesn't kidnap her or force her in any way, but it's she falls in love with him, and she's an everyday girl, and he comes from this old school underworld mafia world of crime. And so how do those two worlds collide, and what would that look like? So that's kind of what we did there. But it kind of just came to me. I had a really long commute every day, and I would just sit in traffic dreaming up scenarios and characters. And when it all kind of came together, it was like, wow, this is amazing. So
Wow. Yeah, when I was on your website and I was reading the summary of it, then I was like, it does kind of remind me of 365 days. I was like, oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yep. Just without like, again, I always heard that old phrase that was like, if you don't see what you're looking for, write it. And so that was kind of my thought, was like, I loved it. I love 365 days. I love this idea of, you know, him being scary and terrifying and, you know, deadly to everyone else. But with her, you know, putting her on this pedestal and treating her like a goddess, and, you know, just her being the exception. And I love that idea. And I was like, what if we could tweak it a little bit? So that was kind of a mentality there.
That's nice. So can you give our listeners like a brief summary of the series?
Yeah, so the story follows our two main characters, Jackson Pace, who is our billionaire mafia don. He's a generational mafia don, so he was like born into service, basically. Like his dad was the don, his grandfather was the don. And so he kind of runs the city of Chicago's underworld. And he's also a billionaire, so he has a hotel chain. And our female main character, she comes into Chicago for a family wedding, and she is staying at one of his hotels. And she is kind of having a rough week because her ex-fiance that cheated on her with like half of their hometown is the best man in this wedding, because he's best friends with her cousin who's getting married. So he's the best man, and her family doesn't really know why they separated, because she was trying to be respectful of like his long-term friendship and with the family. So they're all like pressuring her to get back together with him, just thinking she's, you know, being an unreasonable woman. And she's like, I'm just trying to survive this week of being here and supporting my cousin. And she arrives, and, you know, she's all in her head, and she ends up stopping a kidnapping of the Don, Jackson's daughter. So he's got this 6-year-old daughter, and one of the other mafia clans is trying to kidnap her. And Natalie is just like in the right place at the right time and like stops that from happening. And so Jackson, when he meets her, you know, he's indebted to her, but he's also very suspicious of her right off the bat, because he comes from, again, this dark and dangerous underworld of crime. So he's thinking, you know, like there's an ulterior motive there. And so when he kind of discovers that she's just a good person and just did the right thing because it was, you know, the right thing to do, he's just completely floored. And he falls really hard for her. And so the week that she's there, he's like trying to woo her and, you know, really get to know her a little bit. And they kind of become like the catalyst for change in each other's lives, because she needs to stand up and tell her family really what happened with the ex-fiance, and he needs to let his walls down that he's kind of put up with everyone. So they kind of collide, and nothing's ever the same. And then Ignite, which is the second book in the series, is the continuation of that story, and just new challenges that arrive. And you know, it's just the continuation of that love story. But it's really what would happen if we had this like billionaire underworld mafia lord that kind of just meets your everyday average girl. So, and she's just a nurse, and again, she's like just trying to live the simple life. And, you know, here comes this Mr. Parade to shake everything up. So
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, I'm gonna have to check that series out, because yeah, it does sound like 365 days. I like it.
It's very much that. I would say like the main difference is I wanted it to kind of highlight that, you know, love is the most powerful force of all. So like Jackson's relationship with her is very respectful. Like he literally has her on this pedestal. Like she's in her mind, she's like, I can't compete with you. Like you're a billionaire, you're in high society. And he sees it the complete opposite way, where he's like, you're just the best person I've ever met. And like, some part of him wants to be more like her. So he doesn't feel like he's worthy of her. So it's just this really beautiful love story. And I did want it to, even though we know he's morally gray and he's not a good guy, to still have some good morality lessons in there too, and like what a real healthy relationship should look like of all the things that aren't, you know, completely squeaky clean about our character, like he treats her like a goddess. So that's pretty cool.
So who are a few of your favorite authors, and have any of them inspired any of your novels?
Oh, absolutely. So with Catalyst being like this mafia thriller romance, it's kind of walks the line between both being a romance and also kind of a thriller. So even though we have the romance as like the main focus of the story, there is this like scary plot line that's kind of happening in the background. Obviously, his daughter was almost kidnapped, and we need to figure out who is that was trying to kidnap her? Why were they trying to kidnap her? You know, that whole story too. And I think that just comes from, one, I really like your Stephen King's, your James Patterson's, your like these people who have these immaculate and just, you know, huge webs of plot that they develop. And I wanted that because I wanted my reader, you know, whether they were there for the romance or they were there for the thriller side of it, to kind of get both. Like I wanted them to have a real plot. And, you know, I've always loved, you know, Tolkien and like Rowling, even though, you know, it's difficult to say, but I loved the fact that she developed that whole story, and she had like these just huge webs that she had woven with all of her characters and things that were happening. So I kind of emulated that too. So there will be 12 books total in the series.
Wow.
But so we have our main trilogy that we're going to have here. So there'll be the third book that comes out in the spring. But then we'll have some side characters that you've met in these novels will actually become the main characters in other novels in the series. So our perspective will change, and we'll still get to see Jackson and Natalie, but from like they're the side characters now. Yeah, so it's going to be really cool. And like there's like this massive plot web that's in the background, because I'm a lunatic that never sleeps, apparently. But yeah, some of those authors were really influential to like the way that I wrote and why we kind of wove the web that we did.
Wow. So what was your hardest scene to write, and why?
So there is a scene there's like two scenes I would say in my books where our main female character I want to say like she's assaulted, but like not in like a intimate way. Like she gets kind of like tossed around a little bit. And that was, for me, the hardest scene to write, just because I know like I am very anti-violence against women and all that kind of stuff. So writing a scene that I know takes place, but was, you know, just, it felt like nails on a chalkboard for me to write this scene, because I'm like, I don't want any of this to happen to my main character. I love her and I don't want any of this to happen. And that was kind of tough, because like she gets kind of kidnapped by the bad guy, and the bad guy is, you know, a bad guy. And so writing that scene, it was not fun. I think it translates very well. And I will say like he gets what he deserves, but writing that scene was like, oof, I did not enjoy it. I had to go drink a bottle of wine afterwards, because it's like, this is not, again, like the whole time we have this relationship with Jackson and Natalie where he's so good to her and so respectful and so loving. And then, you know, something bad happens to her with someone who is not respectful or loving to her. And so having that scene in there was tough to write. So
Oh yeah.
Too, because when I thought about writing it, I was like, oh, it's an action scene, right? Like any action scene should be easy to write, because like everything's happening at once. But because it was just such a not fun topic, it was like, I don't like writing this. So I kind of learned there that like I will not be writing any type of really dark, like toxic romance novels. That will not be my jam, because that kind of influenced me. I was like, no, we're gonna stick to like the sweet, you know, sweet with spice. But yeah,
definitely. A lot of the authors that I've interviewed that have had scenes like that in their stories, they said that that's definitely the toughest. They're like, I do not want to touch bases on a sexual assault scene. And I'm like, yeah, I don't
Yep.
blame
No.
you.
Yep. No, that was not one that I could put in my books. Like I just could not. I When I was kind of thinking about like how a character would behave, I was like, maybe that character would do something like this, but I can't write that because it would just again feel like nails on a chalkboard the whole time. So, but that's the one that, will stick in my brain forever. It was like after I wrote it, I was like, okay, and now I need a massage and a therapist and a whole box of wine.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's a very difficult topic to touch. And again, like you don't want to you want to do it the right way. And I would also say there's another scene in my book too that covers like just a very heartbreaking loss for a woman. And that scene was also like very personal to me. So like that scene was like I cried writing the whole scene. But that still wasn't as difficult as writing like this scene that I was like, ugh. If this was a movie, I'd be skipping through that scene. So.
I don't blame you at all. So, what advice would you give to help others who want to pursue a writing career?
Absolutely. So best piece of advice that I actually got from YouTube. And I wish I could remember this amazing YouTuber's channel, but she was kind of just giving out these really fast, what are some new tips for authors? And a couple of her tips were so good. And one of them was to create a writing habit. And that was that if you want to be an author and it's something that you are passionate about, it means that every day, kind of like a workout routine, like you are setting aside time to write something, even if, you are not in the headspace for it. Even if you don't feel like it, you're still sitting down and you're still doing something, even if it's on your phone or it's on a notebook or it's something you are brainstorming, you're keeping yourself in a routine of writing. And even if the next day you come in to sit down for your hour of writing, if that's, what you're setting aside, and you rewrite everything you wrote the previous day, because it's still just having that habit. And she had kind of talked about how if you do that, you will avoid writer's block, because writer's block is, in her opinion, it's just like undisciplined writing, is that if you keep yourself in that writing headspace where like, if you're mowing the lawn or you're folding laundry, you're like still imagining a scene or working through like a difficult scene or like the dialogue that's maybe a problem, you're just constantly staying in that mindset and it just kind of all smooths itself out on its own. So I would say if you are a writer and you love writing, one, map out what you want your story to tell and, the plot that you want to take, obviously, but then make a habit to sit down and make it a priority every day.
Yeah, true. Wow. I love that advice. That's really great advice. I want to thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on my podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
You have a great day.
You too, sweetheart. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for listening to my interview with Nicole. If you want to purchase any of her series or any of her books or see what she's up to, I have linked her website below. It is inherownwords.com. It took me a minute to get that one in, but inherownwords.com. And you can just check out any of her novels that she has out, her series that she's working on, and just a little bit about Nicole. I want to thank you all so much for supporting my podcast, and thank you so much for listening. If you would like to share or comment or be a guest, just let me know. Email me at sheblurb@hotmail.com. Also, my podcast is available on all platforms, so you would never miss an episode. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Make great choices.